Hello, and welcome to Form, a podcast that explores the artistry and architecture behind communication. I'm Silver Wallace.
And I'm Kate Douglas. This week, we speak with arts educator Lisa Sokolov.
Lisa was our professor at university. She teaches a method she's created called Embodied VoiceWork, which explores the resources and power within the process of freeing your voice.
It's big, scary, beautiful work. Lots of crying, lots of joy, lots of rolling on the ground, trying to figure out why babies crawl backwards before they crawl forwards.
I mean, that was theater school, right?
In a nutshell, totally.
We talked to Lisa about the power of language, hate speech, dishonesty, resonant fields, dignity, and so much more. Here's one of our favorite moments from our conversation.
You know, there's this really ancient Jewish text. And it talks about how there are three fields: time, space, and point of view. You know, lens. And I come from a very particular lens. You know, older, white, Jewish, privileged lens of someone who, whose formative time was the 60s and the 70s. So, will I ever get beyond my lens? Will I, if one was imagining a lens as a window, could I slowly make the window larger and larger by breaking through my shadow? But there is something about this incarnation that we are looking through lenses of our experience. And, one of the things that has struck me over the past decades is I can really think I know what's right. And I can be so convinced. And then all of a sudden, just like that, I realize, oh man, I was so off the mark. So that's an interesting thing, and that has to do with lens. And yeah. And I think that's a lot about what the struggle is now in the world. Very hard for me to understand the lens of those folks breaking into Congress with zip ties, and very hard for me to understand the lens of a deep Trump supporter. Really difficult. Do I have to? Do I want to go in there? Would we be better off if we could actually communicate? Yeah, all that is really complex, not.
That brings me to a question. I mean, you just bring up a really beautiful point. And I love the metaphor that you use of your lens as a window. It makes me think about how sometimes I'm just able to look through that window. Sometimes I'm just able to see it. And maybe sometimes all I can do is look and see another perspective. And it's not for me to understand or get. All I can do is just look at it. And that's a start. Like maybe that's a start to some kind of understanding or connection. I don't know.
That goes back to the communicating thing. And that if you really communicate, that action could morph the shape of your window.
We spoke to the writer, composer, multi-hyphenate Todd Allman, who brought up a moment from David Byrne's American Utopia, which I don't know if you've seen or heard. With Todd mentioned the synapses moment about when we're babies, we have many, many synapses, and over the course of our life, they're pruned. And David Byrne near the end cycles back to this fact, suggesting that perhaps these synapses exist in others and thus we need each other. So what you're saying evokes that for me, this idea of over the course of your life, you're pruning your lens, but, and then to access those other possibilities, gifts, lenses, we need others to be
right.
with.
And the other thing, so every child is born with making every sound. And depending on their witness, sounds that are not in the language that they're born into fall away, right? So pretty immediately, within the first 2 years, you are adjusting according to the relational field of that being who's responding to you. And you lose sounds. We don't do a lot of ha sounds in English. So they fell away, right? They're not in our language. But that has to do with the witness, and that you're going into resonant phenomena with your field and your witness. Now, this can go right back to the political piece we had, right? Because people are constantly in reverberation with their particular field that just adds on to the signal. This is a field. This is the culture that I'm in. This is what my group of friends think. And because of that, I get more and more entrenched.
I also wonder if there's even a way to, as you said, this solo work that you're doing and how to communicate, how to bring that self to social situations, given this strong resonant field. What you just said about how language shapes our brain or is shaped by our brain and vice versa, makes me think, there's so much that as part of our upbringing is part of us. So how do, even if we are alone and out of our usual cultural context, there's still some shapes in our brain, some vestiges of our previous witnesses.
Not even vestiges. Absolutely, they are unused. So, that's one of the reasons I'm a huge advocate to learning as many languages as you can. It changes your thinking. It literally changes the patterns in your brain, and we need that as evolving people.
Listeners, you guys can't see us on this Zoom, but I'm just making all of these choreographed signs that my brain is exploding, because you guys don't understand that this feels key. This is this is the key. And I think it's one reason why I enjoy listening to so many different types of music and watching TV in other languages. I love watching dramas on Netflix. Everybody go to Netflix and watch all of the different TV that you can watch in the language that it was made in, and don't switch it to English everything and English subtitles. Just watch it for what it is, because there is and that's such a silly example, but sometimes I'll even just take the subtitles off because I don't want to know immediately. I just want to watch and see what I can pull. This is such a big sidebar, but that just speaks so deeply to me, because I do this all the time, and it's a ritual that I inhabit in my day-to-day life of just that's how I'm trying to make new waves in my brain, is how can I get in contact with as many different types of sound and language and music as possible. Wow. Art is such a beautiful pathway to that.
It is. And learning new languages, to learn a new grammar. I've been working on learning some new languages, and, learning new grammars. My first response is, I'm not going to curse, but, there's no way in hell I'm going to learn this, something you for even asking me to learn this, to really break your entire lifetime of grammatical structure. So, you can learn French and you can learn Spanish, but it's basically your same grammatical structure. So you're learning new language, you're learning some, but grammatically, you're basically, but then you start to break out into other wider languages. That grammar is, completely other. Be it Chinese, Hebrew, Sanskrit, possibly German.
How many languages do you speak, Lisa?
I know little bits of about 5 of them. But, little bits.
One of my pastimes is looking up untranslatable words.
Right.
I love that. I love that in other parts of the world, there's something off the tongue that's part of the shared vocabulary. One of my favorites is, sorry, everyone, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation. L'esprit d'escalier, the spirit of the stairs in French, which is when you leave an argument and then on the feeling you get when you leave an argument and on the stairwell, you think of the perfect thing you should have said in that moment. And I have this feeling all the time. But I'm so happy there's somewhere in the world a word for this or several words for this feeling. But
German is full of those.
There's a German word that I don't know, maybe you do, about the feeling of being lost in the forest, which I have all the time.
This podcast is essentially all of those untranslatable.
Yeah, basically. Do you have any other untranslatable words in German?
The one about, joy over someone else's suffering. What Schadenfreude? What is that?
Schadenfreude.
Yeah,
Schadenfreude. Thank you, Broadway, for bringing us Avenue.
Oh, is that what that's from? I've spent time there, and I have a dear friend, and he'll just say, "Okay, this is the word. It doesn't exist in English. This is the word." And then he tells me my memory stinks, but there's so many of them. It's so very specific. We're in English, we're not specific. We love spaghetti like we love our lover, like we love God, like we love jelly. Love. It's so vague. It's so undiscerning. You feel the same way about a carbohydrate as you do about the person you've committed your entire life to.
It's democratic.
Don't you love spaghetti the same way that you love your life partner?
Do I love spaghetti like I love God? Let's see. It's a very different experience. And our language does not allow for that kind of discernment, right? In Sanskrit, there's like 100 and something words for love, right? It's very particular. I wrote a poem about that, 3 pages of different kinds of love. Yeah, and that whole process of writing that book, trying to make language that's so specific, and now having to navigate translators, so specific. It's like, excuse me, but you can do a translation, but I have to be in on it because a release is not what you think. It's so specific. If you're going to write, you need to be specific.
Maybe you'll find a word in another language that's actually more precise than the one you already have in English.
So cool.
Lisa Sokolov is a renowned frontline vocalist, improviser, composer, and educator. She is the originator of Embodied VoiceWork, and her book, Embodied VoiceWork Beyond Singing, was released by Barcelona Publishers in March 2020. For more, visit lisasokolov.com. Thank you for listening in. I'm Kate Douglas.
And I'm Silver Wallace. Check out our Patreon for more content at patreon.com/formapodcast.
This episode was mixed and produced by me, Kate Douglas. Theme song is by the amazing Warp Trio. Follow us on social @Form Podcast.